Alpha finally makes her unmasked debut. I am Nerd Nation. This week's episode essentially follows 3 scenarios. Alpha's backstory told via flashbacks and memories, the search for Luke, and everything that happened with Lydia. Now, the entire sequence with Alpha and her family in the shelter was exclusive to AMC. There was no backstory of Alpha in the comics, though the written world of The Walking Dead far expands just the comics with several books and one-offs. So maybe one day Alpha will get a canon backstory, but for now, we just have the AMC version. Now, these flashbacks are told from Lydia's point of view, and they're all a mix of false memories implanted by her mother, as well as real memories she's just now remembering. At the start of the whole zombie apocalypse, she's in a shelter with her mother and her father, Frank. Initially, she says her father wants to leave and her mother was the one who convinced him to stay. Just under 3 weeks in, people start to go stir crazy, and when a man named Mateus tries to leave, Lydia's mother stops him but accidentally suffocates him to death. We don't know how many days have gone by before Mateus turned, but apparently it was enough for Lydia's mother to shave her head and Frank to grow a full beard. In the middle of the night, Lydia gets out of bed to go look at the body. In perfect horror genre timing, Mateus turns into a walker within seconds of Lydia turning her back on him. This sets off a series of unfortunate events that leads to her father's death. First is zombie chow, and then later as she recalls the truth by her mother taking a knife to him when he refuses to let Lydia be taken from the shelter. You know, the shelter that's quickly falling into chaos with people screaming and panicking? Yeah, that one. As mentioned, this is exclusive to AMC and most likely won't be canon for the graphic novels, but just to point something out again, how the f did Frank grow such a magnificent beard in only a few days? I mean, I have this little baby stubble here and this takes weeks to grow. I am so jealous of that guy. The next scenario in this episode was Magna's group looking for their friend Luke. Led by Tara, they find walkers eating horses that Alden and Luke were riding. Realizing Lydia was lying about it just being her and her mother, she tells them they're going back to Hilltop to wait it out. Not wanting to wait, Yumiko convinces the others, including Magna, to sneak out to search for Two Hands Luke.
Hey, Two Hands Luke.
Out in the woods, they find tracks that appear to be human-made. Hearing a herd getting closer in the dark, they decide to head back, leaving Kelly behind with Connie, comforting her. It's also here that a whisperer watches them, which seems to be how they found Hilltop. Magna and Yumiko return to Hilltop the next morning and are confronted by Tara. Tara, however you say it. As they're talking, the whisperers show up not too far behind them. Just like the flashbacks, this was also exclusive to AMC. In the comics, Magna and her group never left Alexandria. During this time frame, actually, there's only one mention of them, and that's when Magna is talking to Andrea about Eugene. Since AMC brought them to Hilltop, where most of the action takes place, that must mean they have something big planned for this group.
It's not just big, it's huge!
Most of this episode is around Lydia and herself. The first part picks up right where the last episode left off, with Lydia and Henry talking. She tells him about her mother, and Henry tells Lydia about both sets of his parents and about his community. During this time, Daryl quickly steps in to shut that shit down before he gives away too much information.
I will shut that shit down, no exception.
Henry finds out that Daryl is using him and calls him an asshole.
And she's right about you know that? You're an asshole.
I knew it, I'm surrounded by assholes.
Daryl heads down to give it a try himself, now playing the part of a good cop.
Hi, buddy. I'm your friendly neighborhood police officer. Would you like a glass of water?
After some daddy issues come up, Daryl storms off, only to be confronted by Henry, who tries to convince him that Lydia's people may be bad, but Lydia seems like a good person who is just abused, and Daryl can show her there are still good people out there.
You can show her there's nothing to be afraid of.
Sometime later, Henry sneaks down and springs Lydia from her cell.
You're letting me out?
Out on their date, they partake in some fine dining, a moonlit walk, and a closely avoided homicide. When hearing a baby cry, Lydia's PTSD shows up in full force and she asks to be put back in her cell. She asks Henry if he can stay down there with her for the night, and they fall asleep holding hands. Aww. The next morning, Lydia seems to have a change of heart as she opens up to Daryl and Henry about what she thinks really happened when she was young. She also gives them the full story on her people and what type of person her mother is. While they're talking, the Whisperers approach Hilltop with Alpha walking up through the pack. She steps out in front as Daryl runs from the cells up to the gate to join Tara and the others. She introduces herself as Alpha and says she only wants her daughter, ending the episode. Okay, so this is where the bulk of the comic source material was used. As we talked about in the other video, it's Carl who befriends Lydia. Carl! If you want to know about how their initial encounter went, make sure to check out my other previous video that covered episode 9. And while you're at it, click that subscribe button down below. The one kind of down there somewhere. Since YouTube demonetized my channel along with thousands and thousands of others, your views, shares, and comments are kind of what I consider my payment for now. Just like in AMC's version, Carl gets locked up in a cell near Lydia and is talking, getting to know her. Lydia in the comics, though, is a lot more open about who she is and who her people are. There's really no deception or trying to trick him. She tells Carl that it was her first outing out with her group when they attacked his people. She didn't want to participate and really regrets doing it, but there's been so many bad people that the Whisperers no longer wait around for new people to kill them first. She does admit, though, that she's scared the Hilltop people will kill her for what she's been a part of, to which Carl assures her they won't. During their talk, Maggie comes down and lets Carl out, saying his story checks out. Also covered in the previous video. A couple things to note, though. Unlike the AMC's Lydia, who's constantly sobbing, this Lydia only cries when Carl leaves and she's alone, remembering her friend Joshua who was killed by Jesus. Also, she never goes into a backstory of her past or how much of a monster her mother is. In fact, Alpha in the comics really isn't that bad. She just wants to protect her people and only attack in self-defense or when people cross into her territory. But we'll get into that later on. She confesses to Carl that this is the first time she's ever been truly alone. Even out there in the wilderness, she had the dead among her to protect her and felt comforted with them around. But now, in this cell at the mercy of others, she doesn't know how to handle it. Carl tries to help her feel not so scared by giving him the one thing he's always had around with him to make him feel brave: his father's sheriff's hat. It's around this time that Maggie and Jesus show up to find him talking with her. They get upset since her talking with Carl may sway her and not want to talk to them. And this turns out true, as soon as Carl is shooed away, she closes up. Jesus, getting frustrated, talks it over with Maggie and they decide to let her out under Carl's watch. A bit later, Carl heads back down to her cell and lets her free, with the promise she's not going to cause any trouble or try to escape. Just like the AMC version, Carl and Lydia find a spot to sit down and get to know each other.
Hunger's a gift.
AMC had Lydia eat a worm. In the comics, on the other hand, they had Lydia lick Carl's eye socket. The other stark contrast is they're out during the daytime, not at night, and since this was Jesus and Maggie's idea, there's no sneaking around, except kinda hiding to be alone. It's during this alone time that Carl finally becomes a man.
Did I just score?
After they're finished, Lydia tells him that was nice and then kind of opens up about being raped, thinking it's just a normal thing now. But being with Carl to the hilltop, she sees there's another way and she tells him she doesn't want to go back now. He promises he won't let her and will talk with Maggie. It's at this time that the Whisperers have shown up at the gates of the hilltop with a lone one out in front. Maggie heads out to meet them and the lone Whisperer asks if she's the leader. Maggie replies, "I am," and tells them they don't want a conflict, but if there is, Hilltop is more than capable of defending themselves. It's here that the Whisperer removes their mask to introduce themselves as Alpha, and just like AMC's version, she only wants her daughter.
I'm Alpha. And we only want one thing from you. My daughter.
Where's my daughter?
Similar to AMC, this is also the first look at Alpha unmasked in the comics. A big difference though is this Alpha looks a lot more cleaned up. There's no Uncle Fester black around the eyes and mouth look, no rotting teeth. She does have a shaved head though. I'm conflicted on this. I think it's a good idea to make her look more nasty since they've gone years without brushing and probably washing. However, something about the particular way AMC has made her look just doesn't quite sit right with me. She just looks way too off. A change AMC made that I rather did like though was Alpha touching the shoulders of the Whisperers as she walked through them. This made it look more animalistic to me, kind of like she's showing dominance and shooing the others aside, meaning them subordinate. This was a very slow episode and used as filler to introduce Alpha, but did you like it when she finally did show up unmasked? Which version did you prefer? AMC's more wildling looking evil pack leader, or the comics more normal looking, reasonable sounding version? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, keep on whispering.